Are you ready for the entertainment experience of a lifetime? Knockdown, drag-out, hard-hitting conversations, debates, and interviews. Well, if you said yes to any of these questions, sit back, relax, and enjoy something like no other. This is the Isolation Series podcast, presented by the Scott Robles team at Douglas Elliman Real Estate, by wellbeingsperformance.com for all your online meeting needs, by Barbarian Steakhouse, Canada's premier upscale restaurant. For more information, go to barbarians.com, by imprintpilates.com Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's premier Pilates studio, and by the Toronto Immune and Digestive Health Institute. For more information, go to tidhi.ca. Here now is your host, Spencer Miller.
Hey guys, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Isolation Series with me, Spencer Miller. Very pleased to be joined once again by my co-host and partner in crime in this little thing we like to refer to as the Isolation Series, Paul Shields. But Paul, we are very pleased to be joined by a very good friend of mine and one of the senior members of the Canadian men's Paralympic hockey team and a 9-time sledge hockey medalist. The one and only Greg Westlake joins us on the Isolation Series today. Greg, welcome for the very first time to the Isolation Series, my friend.
Spence, thanks for having me, brother. It's been far too long, my man.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. You have been fortunate to be a part of the Canadian men's hockey program since the age of 20 in 2006, if not a little bit before that. But your first Olympics, I believe, was Turin 2006, when you guys took home the gold. And you've been a part of that since then. And a large part of your career was being the captain of the Canadian men's Paralympic hockey team until recently, where you relinquished that title and passed it on to the next generation. But my question to you is, with everything going on still currently, especially in the last few weeks with the pandemic, what are your guys' thoughts about everything being up in the air again with the Olympics? Because I don't know if there's a go, no-go date necessarily, but there's a lot of talk that it might be postponed or canceled again based on variants and different things like that. And for somebody like you, who is going back to represent your country one last time before you hang up your sled, does that bother you at all?
100%. You know, it's starting to feel like, you know, you could have this podcast 3 years from now and it could still be called the Isolation Series, and that would work out for you. So, you know, it does feel like this is going on forever. But I think what's really unique for us as kind of amateur athletes in Canada that just love to compete and, you know, love going to the Olympics and Paralympics, I think what's different for us is we don't have pro teams, you know. So if we choose not to go, or if the Olympics get canceled, like, I don't go back to an NHL season. Like, this game's going on is what we're training for. And so I hope it happens. I hope that we send a big team of Canadian athletes to go represent the country and create some magical Olympic moments that, you know, kids will remember forever, and hopefully get them hooked onto sport and living an active lifestyle. So I still hope for that opportunity. I think it's going to happen. I just think there's going to be a lot of red tape around it, testing every day, and, you know, maybe not the same Olympic experience that we were expecting, but I think there'll still be one for sure.
What initially got you into sledge hockey and therefore subsequently got you on the radar of the Canadian hockey and para hockey radar, for that matter?
Yeah, well, I think I was playing stand-up hockey as a kid with two artificial legs, and you just kind of hit that age. For me, it was around 15, 16 years old, where you realize that, you know, you're probably not going to be the first NHL hockey player on two artificial legs. And once you realize that, it doesn't have to be a limiting experience. It can be an eye-opening experience. You know, and so for me, one door closed, and that was playing stand-up hockey with my buddies from school, but another door opened, and that was this amazing world of para sport and the Paralympics and representing my country and all that good stuff that comes with it. So for me, it was just about making that transition from playing able-bodied sports with kind of my friends from school to okay, where can I take sport? I love being an athlete. Hockey is my best sport. How far can I take it? And that's where my parents were a huge help. I remember my mom telling me, if sports is important to you and that's something that you want to do in your life, I'm sure there's an avenue that we can find, but we got to go find that. And for me, it ended up being, para ice hockey.
The three of us on this show right now are big advocates in making sure that people knock down some of these stigmas of parasport and being a Paralympian or being a sledge hockey player or whatever the case may be. What, in your opinion, do you think needs to still happen in order for people to really look at these sports as the best of the best, competing at the highest level on an amateur rank, like you just mentioned earlier, but right on par with the quote unquote able-bodied Olympic athletes, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, seeing is believing. And for me, like, I'm a good example of it because I didn't want to play a Paralympic sport. Like, I just wanted to play able-bodied sports with my friends from school. That I always thought that being an athlete gave me a separate identity. It gave me an identity outside of just somebody who was living with a disability. And so for me, if I could go play good or play well at stand-up hockey, like, that gave me another identity at school. So I didn't want to lose that. And so it took me going and seeing these Paralympic sports in person, live, but more importantly, meeting some of the athletes. Because I think in Paralympic sport, you really fall in love with the stories as well, right? And I met some incredible athletes like the Brad Bowdens and Billy Bridges, from the para hockey world, and they could shoot the puck, over 70 miles per hour. They were these big buff dudes that you could tell worked out in the gym, didn't just show up and play. They treated their bodies really well. And I just remember seeing it. And for me, that changed everything because I saw the athletes, I fell in love with the stories. And then most importantly, it was a pretty, badass sport, full contact, get to wear that same Maple Leaf jersey that, all my hockey heroes wore as a kid got to do. So for me, it was just a no lose situation. I saw only positives. And from that day forward, I just couldn't wait to get more and more involved.
Why don't you talk about the unbelievable partnership that you guys have been able to do recently with a great company like Tempur-Pedic? Because full disclosure, you and I have known each other for a long time, but there was a giant gap in between us, connecting and things like that. I believe we went from 2006 until August without connecting, or a little bit before that. I think I saw you last when you were 17 years old or something like that. And then I saw you back in August because a very long time friend of mine and friend of the show did a partnership with you guys and Tempur-Pedic, and that's what allowed us to reconnect. But just the campaign that they did behind that is something tremendous with the documentary and everything like that. So why don't you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, first off, it was great to reconnect with you again. It's been so many years and so many mutual friends. So it was great to see you there that day, of course. And yeah, we just did a really cool kind of mini documentary series. We did 2 separate ones, and they were with Tempur-Pedic Canada, and they've been an incredible partner for us. So when you ask me about kind of what can we do to make the Paralympics and some of these amateur athletes bigger and better, campaigns like this are some of the driving forces behind what really helps us. And so they brought in GSP, who of course is just an incredible Canadian athlete who represents, what, in my opinion, what some of the ideals of being Canadian are. He's just such a humble, hardworking, successful guy. And so it was awesome to get in the gym and get on the ice with him. And then he could kind of vouch and say, hey guys, I played this sport. It's hard. It's a good workout. I enjoyed it. I had a good time out there. So just having GSP in our corner, and a big company like Tempur-Pedic, who, hooked us up with all the mattresses, and I love them. That's a big thing for our sport as well. It's just the storytelling and sharing all that stuff. And so for them to come in and make documentaries on the players in our team and really treat us like, grade A superstars, the same way they would treat a GSP, it really meant a lot to us.
Yeah, big shout out to Adele and her team from Tempur-Pedic. as well as the great director and person who helped curate the idea, and that is Sean Loverink, who did an absolutely amazing job. You want to check him out for sure on Instagram, both of them. And I would be remiss if I did not throw it over to Paul for a moment. Paul, I know that hockey has been a huge part of your life for a very long time. I know that you have said on this program multiple times that you're happy to retire to your beer league hockey that you do a couple of times a week now and things like that. But do you have any specific questions that you would like to ask Greg with his experience on the ice as long as he's been doing it on such a high level?
Absolutely. Thanks, Spence. And thanks so much, Greg, for joining us today. I actually have two questions. One, for people that are maybe new to sledge hockey, they only see it at the Olympics or they just kind of catch it when it's being broadcast on TSN here and there. What are some of the biggest differences that they'll see and some of the things they can expect that they might not expect from your brand of hockey? And second, do you have a moment that stands out among all of your accolades and all of your championships that just stands above the rest?
Yeah, you know what? Great questions. I appreciate it. I think first off with our sport, I think the thing that people see that they maybe don't expect is just how close to, you know, kind of quote unquote a stand-up hockey game it is. You know, we play all the same rules. It's full contact, you know, same size net, same size ice surface. And kind of one comment that I hear a lot is, you know, you start off watching kind of a sledge hockey game or a para hockey game, and a lot of people say after kind of 5-10 minutes of watching, they forget that we're kind of sitting in these sleds and playing that way, and you start just to kind of switch your mentality to just watching a hockey game. And that's been one thing that I hear that I think is not so much a compliment, but just a good testament to the athletes that we have in our sport that work so hard to push the sled so fast and shoot the puck so hard. And people often just say that, just, yeah, you sit down and visually it looks a little different at the start, but eventually you just find yourself watching a hockey game like you would any other game. And so I really appreciate that. And that's why I encourage many people to watch as much as possible. And, you know, for me, when it comes to like big moments, you know, I think I'm kind of an example of somebody that's just looking for that next one. You know, I had so many big moments at a young age in my career. You know, it's 2021 right now. And a lot of my best moments were 2006, we won a gold medal. In 2008, I scored a really big goal at a world championship. In 2013, you know, I won best forward of the tournament at a world championship. But the problem with all these things, they were all a long time ago. And so I like talking about it, but I don't love talking about it because I wish I had something from, you know, 2019, 2020, but I don't. So I'm still here and I'm still pushing and looking for that next moment, looking for that next big one, you know. So, you know, for me, that's why I'm so passionate about these Paralympics and these games happening is, you know, I am that lifelong amateur athlete that's just doing this on a dream and a whim and the kid in me that still just loves the game of hockey. So, you know, for me, I would love that opportunity to go out there and lay it on the line one last time. Like that would mean everything to me.
It just goes to show you right there that we are getting old, Greg. You know,
Spence, you've been way too polite for too long. I was waiting for something, you know?
Yes. Well, you know, just like every athlete, we all go through our cycles and different things like that. And obviously, I'm hoping that you do get that, you know, shining moment as you go off into the sunset here after these Olympics, if the Olympics do in fact end up happening on time and whatnot. But you know, we can just call you the Joe Thornton of the Canadian men's Paralympic hockey team at this point, or something like that.
I have won before. You know, there's a big distinction there.
Right.
Joe's the best, man. He everyone who plays with him, it just looks like they have the best time, the most fun. So, you know, as I get older, I try to be a little more relaxed and a little more fun. So that's okay.
Right. One thing that I want to touch on before we go into other sports as well here is, why don't you talk about the physically demanding side of things with this sport specifically for a moment? Because yes, you do need to stay in great shape and make sure that you're in great shape and have a strict diet, especially when you're preparing for a world championships or an Olympic games. But more specifically, you need to tell people about how when we play sledge hockey, you can stab yourself pretty dangerously in the thigh multiple times a game. And I can say that from experience because when I played net all those years ago, I stabbed myself at least 7, 8 times in a tournament easy.
Oh, that's funny. You know what? Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's one of the things that drew me to the sport was I didn't want to do it if it was easy. And so, you go out, you try it, and it turns out it's really, really darn hard, and so, yeah, the guys have an incredible amount of upper body strength. At the end of the day, for our sport, it's really strength to weight ratio, right? It's how fast can you get your body moving. So you want to be lean, you want to be low weight, but then as strong as possible as well. So those types of workouts are really tough because you're trying to be as lean as possible, but as strong as possible. So, you're doing a lot of really hard circuits. You're doing just really, really tough workouts. And I think the thing for us that's really changed over the years as well is when I first came into the team, it was a bit of, a club team atmosphere. The sport was really new and it was growing. And now when you look at it kind of 20 years into the program, the kids nowadays and the people coming up, there's no introduction. Like, you have to be fit right away. We don't have time to teach you how to do that. So, the 20-year-old kids in our team right now are just these jacked big guys. And so, if you don't work twice as hard as them as you get older, you'll be out of the sport pretty quickly. So it's really intense. It's really hard. But again, like I said, that's kind of what got me into it. If it was easy, I wouldn't want to do it. So I really enjoy that. And you're right. The big metal picks at the end of them, you can't get mad when you stab yourself because that's easy to do. But I like to think that you give more to other people. So you got to take a little bit as well.
Right. But for the layman that is watching and or listening to this, why don't you explain the pick scenario at the end of the stick?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the end of our two sticks, we have two sticks, one in each hand, that propel us in the ice. And the way that works is we have big metal spikes at the end of the stick that dig into the ice. And that's really what we use to propel ourselves down the ice. So you can imagine they're really sharp. They aren't very long. So there's kind of a rule, so you can't really go into somebody. But, there's no rule on how much drag you can create or how much, you can slice and dice. So it can get pretty nasty out there. And, like you said, though, a lot of the worst picks or cuts or stuff like that, a lot of those happen to yourself or they happen by accident. You just get tangled up with another guy and, you're trying to push off and maybe you happen to go in picks first, whatever. But no, most of the times it's an accident,
So, Paul, what Greg is really saying, it's like a real life version of a Ginsu knife at this point. Now, we talked about you being very fortunate to be named a captain of the Canadian men's Paralympic hockey team throughout your career. What went into the process of you helping name your successor in the current captain, Tyler McGregor? Because a lot of thought process and process in general must have gone through that when it was happening. And how much did they lean on you to help pick your successor, if at all?
You know what? Not much, honestly. Ty does a great job. I know for me, I feel really lucky to, I was able to become, the captain at 23, 24 years old, which is a really young age. I was able to do that for a full, 2 Paralympic cycles, which is, 2 quads. So 8 years of that. So I felt really lucky that I got to kind of do what I did for as long as I got to do it. And then I took some time off after the Korea Games and, we moved on with Ty as the captain. When I came back, it was just as simple as, hey, we're going this direction. That they did let me present him with a jersey and kind of, name him captain, which was really cool and nice of them. They didn't have to do that. So we did that over at, Tyler's a cancer survivor and above knee amputee. And we got to do that over at the Terry Fox statue in the East Coast. So we did that and presented a nice jersey with the C on it, kind of said congratulations. And for me, that stuff makes me emotional because, it's not an accolade for one guy. It's a bit of a family thing, right? And, when you play as long as I've been playing, you get to know guys' families, their parents, their sister, their girlfriend and wives and all that stuff. And, Ty's got a nice tight knit family there. And, I was thinking about how proud his parents must be and how nice of a moment that must be for his family. So it was cool to be able to share in that.
No question about it. Let's move on from the Olympics and the hockey talk for a moment and go to your post hockey career after this Olympic cycle. You're looking to get more into the broadcast side of things yourself. Outside of hockey, though, what is Greg Westlake's go-to sport? Because a lot of the time when people look at amateur athletes at the high level that you've been at for so long, you get typecast or pigeonholed as the Paralympian or the sledge hockey guy or whatever. But outside of that, what is the sport that stirs your drink, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. Like, I consider myself a bit of a sports nerd. Like, I'm that guy that, if you want to talk baseball, let's talk baseball. You want to talk basketball, let's talk basketball. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm a nerd. I was that kid that, could tell you players' heights and weights and, what round and where they were drafted. I was that guy. I just have always loved high level sport and wanted to be a part of it. So, for me, it was NHL hockey as a kid. And then right now it's funny, like I still love the game of hockey, but I watch so much of it that sometimes you just want to take your mind off anything else. And so for me right now, that would either be probably a basketball game or a UFC fight night. But like I'm a big MMA fan. I'm a big basketball fan. Those would probably be 1A and 1B.
So let's talk about this. About a week and a half ago now, UFC 269 took place in Las Vegas, Nevada, and one of the biggest upsets in mixed martial arts history happened when Juliana Pena took out the GOAT Amanda Nunes to become the champion in that division. My question to you is, Paul and I talked about it on the Monday edition of the podcast last week, where Amanda Nunes just didn't look right at all in that fight and didn't look like she was checked into that fight, because if you look at the choke that she tapped out on,
it wasn't under the chin, was it?
It wasn't really under the chin. It was like she already had dinner plans and wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. Again, not taking anything away from Juliana Pena, because Juliana Pena stood in there on the feet as well and really gave it to Amanda Nunes before they went to the ground. But it seemed like a very anticlimactic ending to that fight. What were your thoughts on that? And do you agree with Paul and I that it just seemed like she didn't really care and wanted to necessarily get the burden of carrying two belts at the same time off of her back?
Yeah, well, I think it shows you how special some of those fighters are that can do it in two different weight classes, or just champions who have those long reigns. The Anderson Silvas, the GSPs, the people that can do it for 5, 6, 7 years. It shows you how special they are. Because
Daniel Cormier as well. Daniel Cormier.
Daniel Cormier. And you look at Amanda Nunes, and they finally rolled out the red carpet for her, right? They built this star. They had the big entrance for her, like the 8-minute walk, all that stuff, and she didn't want to do it. So, and on that choke, it reminded me a bit of, when Khabib choked Conor, that wasn't really under the chin. That was just a lot of pressure right on the jaw. So, I know that choke can hurt, but that one, she didn't even have her hooks put in the back. It looked pretty, it didn't look like the most high stress situation. So I don't know. I think once she couldn't get Pena out of there right away, I think she just, I think she folded. I think she knew she didn't have the cardio to go 5 rounds to go that championship, length. And I think I can't imagine being in a fight and being gassed. Like, that must be the most scary thing in the world, though, when you got 35 more minutes with a killer and you're out of gas. Or not 35, but 30 more minutes. Like, that must be insane. So I just think she ran out of gas. I think she landed some good shots, realized Pena wasn't going anywhere, and looked for a way out. So I'm kind of I'm on that side of it.
Do you believe that, unlike Ronda Rousey, when Ronda Rousey got defeated by Holly Holm, and at the time it was one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, Ronda Rousey never really bounced back and got shelled in her following couple of fights, and then went to the WWE for a year and a half, and we haven't seen her since then, really. Do you believe that Amanda Nunes will bounce back from this and recapture that belt off Juliana Pena? Or do you think that she'll end up going down more of a rabbit hole like we saw with Ronda Rousey? Because up until Ronda Rousey got tuned that night by Holly Holm, she was pretty much unstoppable and thought of as the GOAT as well.
Yeah, you know what? I think in MMA, I think you can't have one foot in, one foot out. I think once you start thinking about other career opportunities, get out of the sport. You're going to get hurt. And, you know, Ronda had the WWE. She was also doing like movies like The Fast and the Furious at the time. You know, she had a lot of other career opportunities that were paying her. And I don't think you can train at that championship level and do 6 other things. And so I think Amanda Nunes comes back. I think she comes back better. I don't know if she wins that belt back again, but I think she comes back and wins a bunch more fights because, I mean, she's not out there doing movies. She's not out there, you know, with a singing career. She's not doing reality TV. This is her bread and butter, fighting. And so I think she'll go home. She'll realize kind of what pays the bills, and she'll focus on that for a little bit.
Okay, going to basketball for a moment. I want to get
your stuff, Spence. You can go everywhere too,
that's why it's the isolation series, and that's why Paul's name is not on the front of this podcast. In fact, my name is. But I want to talk about the Toronto Raptors and just basketball in general, as we've seen over the last 10 days or so. The Omicron variant has really run rampant across all sports. We've seen that this week with week 15 of the NFL season extending pretty much through every day this week, seemingly, except for tomorrow. And we've seen the last couple of Raptors games against the Orlando Magic and their upcoming game against who I forget who their next game after the Magic is, but their last couple games have been postponed, and other teams have been postponed as well. And earlier today, the NHL and the NHLPA have agreed to pause the entire season from December 22nd, tomorrow, through Christmas on Saturday, December 25th. What are your thoughts on this virus and this variant really picking up steam again, the likes of which we haven't seen since Rudy Gobert tested positive and stopped everything initially in the first place?
Remember that when Rudy Gobert was touching all the microphones and stuff? Like, you would get in so much trouble if you did that now. But, you know, it just shows you how little we thought of it to how we think of it now. But, you know, I'm going to sound like a bit of an old guy here. But when I think about the Omicron and the league shutting down again, you know, I think about guys like Alex Ovechkin chasing this record by Wayne Gretzky. And I think about, you know, some of the guys, you know, the Chris Pauls on the Phoenix Suns who like, they want to win their championship and get their moment in the sun. And I hope they get the opportunity because, you know, I know for me, we're training for Beijing right now. And every day it seems like I'm going. The next day it seems like I'm not going. And it's hard mentally to stay with it. And so I think about all these athletes who they put their life, you know, their life's work into this, and not getting able to pay it off. And so I just hope we get, you know, if the season has to end in August, it has to end in August, you know, but let's get to the finish line as safely as possible, because I like seeing athletes with the opportunity to achieve their goals. And I love watching that. It's what attracts me to sports, and I want to see it all, you know, play out.
Do you believe that Major League Baseball will end up ratifying their current lockout that they are in prior to the so-called start of spring training mid-February, or do you think that it'll end up going into March and end up affecting the beginning of the season? Because the argument can be made that Major League Baseball has never fully recovered from the 1994 strike yet. So I believe that if this strike goes longer than anticipated, it may end up being absolutely detrimental to Major League Baseball, who, as I said, have not recovered fully from a strike that took place almost 28 years ago.
Yeah, well, and now the revenue in the game, they're making so much money other places, right? Their streaming revenue and their advertisement revenue. So I actually think baseball is in a really good spot right now. And I think what you have in baseball, from my standpoint, is just a competitive imbalance. You have 8 to 10 teams that are willing to go out there and spend money. I sound like Scott Boras right now, but then you got 20 other teams that refuse to spend a dime, and you can't have that competitive imbalance. And then teams paying for other teams. So I think they got to sort out the revenue sharing. But past that, to your point, I don't think they can take any time off. I think they got to roll out. And I think coronavirus is a bigger risk to them than the lockout. I think they're going to sort out the lockout and be ready to go. I think all these owners spent a lot of money already on players right before the lockout. They want to go play with their new toys, and I think it's going to get sorted out. I really do.
Right. Being from the Toronto area, do you believe that the Blue Jays, once they're allowed to, are going to continue to hit the free agent market, or do you think that they've made their one and only big quote unquote free agent splash before the lockout began by signing Kevin Gausman from the San Francisco Giants to a 5-year, $110 million deal? Because we saw Marcus Semien leave and join the Texas Rangers of all teams on a contract of 7 years and $175 million. So we need to we need to fill that departure and things like that. And you hope that Kevin Gausman can still do what he's been doing for the last couple of years to pick up the departure of Robbie Ray as well. But I firmly believe that they need to look at bringing in somebody like a Trevor Story or a Kyle Seager or a Matt Chapman before the season starts to really give the fan base in Toronto and around Canada, for that matter, the confidence that they're willing to take that next step with the young guys like Vladdy really starting to blossom into their own as well.
Yeah, I think they've proven that they're willing to spend the money and build around their young core right now, and they've proven that with George Springer last year. Even, the deal they did with Barrios was a big deal, and I know that doesn't count as a free agent signing, but that's kind of what you got to do if you're in Toronto. The Raptors as well can take a page from this playbook. But they brought in a guy who's not from North America. They sold him on Canada. They sold him on Toronto. And then they got the big 5-7 year deal with him. I forget what it was, but then they got the big extension with him, but they sold him first on the city. And so I think you're going to see more of that with the Jays. I think you're going to see 1 or 2 more big trades, and then get the guy over here, get him to Toronto, sell him on the city, sell him on the country. I would love to see it done with Ramirez, the third baseman. I would love to see that. I'm in that boat. But I think you bring him in, he's still got 1 or 2 years left on his deal. You get him in Toronto, get him around what looks to be a really fun team. Like, they're dancing in the dugout. Like, that team has fun. And so I think you bring a guy in, get him into that clubhouse, get him involved in the culture, and then maybe you start talking extension. But the way they did it with Barrios, I think, was hands down just the way that Toronto sports have to operate.
What are your thoughts on the much initially maligned duo of Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins? Because when they came in, everybody and their cousin pretty much did not like the move because Alex Anthopoulos was
we got to give a big high five to Anthopoulos right now. What a season.
Yes. Yeah, but that frustrates me a little bit because the Atlanta Braves had 88 wins during the regular season, somehow get into the playoffs and win the World Series, when the Jays had 2 more victories in the regular season, but based on the division that they play in, the American League East, they couldn't even get into the playoffs.
Yeah, if the Jays make the playoffs last year, I believe they win the World Series, and I'm not alone in that mindset. Like, I even just think their pitching was set up in a way that they didn't rely on one guy to go out there and have to go 3 times in the series. Like you see the Scherzers of the world do, where you start in game 1, game 3 or 4, and then he comes in out of the pen in 5 or 6. Like, we didn't need that. I think Manoah was great. We just have a deep rotation. Manoah, Ray, Barrios, Ryu. Like, we were just going to beat you down over 7 games. I love the setup of that team and the way that they were aligned to go in a 7-game series. So it's sad that we didn't get to see it, but it's not like anything changed. Like, what changed here? Like, we were still in the AL East. We're in a hard division. We knew that going into the year. We're going to have to win a ton of games next year to get in. So, I think what's, kind of the curse and the good and the bad about being in this hard division in baseball is when you make it, you had a good team, but unfortunately it's some of these fringe teams that, you're going to kind of forget about down the road. And it's too bad because they were a really, really darn good team. And, even the veterans, like Simeon, deserve that chance. He came in, he played every single game and played on a Gold Glove, Silver Slugger type season, and doesn't get to
MVP type season. My favorite quote from him was at the end of the season when he broke Davey Johnson's 1973 home run record by a second baseman. The press asked him what his thoughts were on breaking such a long-standing record. His quote was, quote, "I don't care, I'm a shortstop."
Yeah.
It was hilarious to me at how
that was a show me the money comment. That was a show me the money. He wanted 7 years. He wanted that shortstop money, not that second base money.
Correct. Now, before we wrap it up, I want to throw it over one more time to Paul. Paul, if you have any more questions, feel free to fire them off at Greg right now.
Spence, I think you covered everything. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thanks, Greg. It was really great to meet you, and amazing interview. Really appreciate it.
I love what you guys do, man. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and on that note, because it is the first time that you are joining us here on the Isolation series, I'm going to get you out of here the same way that I get all my first-time guests out of here on, and that is, do you have a couple of Spence moments or a couple of Spence memories that you would like to share with the audience? Because I know, like I said off the top, it's been a long time. We went a long time before connecting again, and I'm asking you to go back into the recesses of your brain for some of these memories. But we have been friends for a long time, and it's one thing to hear it from my side of the coin. It's a whole other thing to hear it from the other person's side of the coin. So does anything come to mind that you would like to share with the people right now?
You know what? Definitely, Spence. I think any chance I have to embarrass you, I have to take. So, no, you know what, Spence? I think that reconnecting with you at the George St. Pierre video shoot was the perfect day because, George is amazing at what he does, but George protects his image. You know that, right? Like, he's going to show up, he's going to be polite, he's going to say and do all the right things, and he's going to, just be the model citizen. And then that day's done, he gets out of there, right? So Spence comes in and Spence is very comfortable around George, very comfortable around us as Paralympians. And so I think you showed up that day just to be the icebreaker between the two. And so what I love is we get in the change room and we're all changing and stuff, and Spence starts talking about clubbing with GSP and going out on the town and some of the fun nights they'd have and some of the inside jokes they would play on each other, and just starts burying GSP, just embarrassing this guy. But like, he knows how to take a joke. He can have a laugh at himself, but I just thought it was great because you really humanized him. So you came in and started telling just real life embarrassing GSP stories. He took it well, but then we all kind of got to hang out just as friends and as people. You broke him down. So I won't say what you said exactly, but it was just nice for you to come in and be as comfortable as you were, be the Spence that everybody knows and loves, which is just give those stories, make everybody feel like the same and included. And I loved it.
Well, also, why don't you speak a little bit to earlier on in the day, because I was not there right from the beginning of the early shoot. I showed up like an hour and a half into it. Why don't you talk about what George said to you guys before I showed up? Because I found that quite funny that he mentioned me and you turned to Ty or somebody that was next to you stretching or whatever, and you said, "Hey man, I think that's Spence that I knew from like 04, 05, 06, right from the beginning of my tenure here."
Yeah, my first impression of Spencer Miller was radio shows in Toronto. back when the radio shows were big craze, and baseball. And so I knew you as a guy that was friends with Paul Rosen, who loved Roberto Alomar. That's how I knew you growing up. So I was like, this Spence guy knows his baseball, loves talking baseball, loves Roberto Alomar, and that's all I knew. And I knew you from the kind of radio personality that you were at the time. And so GSP just kind of mentions, he said, yeah, my buddy Spence is going to come by. He might know a few of you guys, like whatever. And I thought he was being kind of, it's always interesting in those situations when you just bring somebody in. And I thought he was just like, oh, I know a guy who has a disability, so I'll bring him out to the para team, and that's going to be a natural fit. And I'm like, no, man, like, that's not how this works. But then you came in and, and immediately I was like, oh, no, this is how this works. And you came in, you're making fun of us and the sledge hockey guys and GSP. And no, it was Adam Dixon. And Adam Dixon turned to me and he goes, I think that's Spencer Miller, who used to be friends with Paul Rosen. And so that's where, when you came in, I was real excited to see you, because I had heard stories of you for probably 10 years at that point.
Special shout out to Paul Rosen as well, because Paul Rosen, at the beginning of Greg's career, and a lot of these veterans on the Canadian Paralympic hockey team right now's career, was the goaltender in 2006 and 7 and things like that. He came in late in life after he had his situation with his leg and everything like that. I just remember you guys killing yourselves laughing, because I would put Rosen in check about anything to do with baseball or Robbie Alomar, and we would fight back and forth, and you guys would love it because you would just let us go. And so special shout out to Paul Rosen as well.
And what was his beef? He always said Alomar wasn't the best second baseman of all time, or what was it?
Yes, something like that. And we kept going back and forth, and I've known that guy forever. So, it's nice that he was able to bridge that gap way back in the day with a 16, 17-year-old Greg. Here you are as a grizzled veteran now, and here I am as just an old bastard. And then you got Paul up there just sitting there listening to everything, dressed in black and white, looking like a rip-off member once again of the NWO today. So, we're an interesting band of misfits here on the Isolation Series on any given day. But Greg, thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to having you on again in the not too distant future. And hopefully we can set something up to have you on right after you bring home the gold in this upcoming Paralympic Games in February, my friend.
Hey, that'd be incredible, man. I love what you guys are doing. And yeah, you know me, I love talking sports. I love talking everything. So glad to be back anytime.
Absolutely. Stay right there. But that is Greg Westlake, the legend himself, Paralympic athlete, sledge hockey athlete. And this has been another edition of the Isolation Series. Me, Spencer Miller. Special thank you once again to my co-host and partner in crime, Paul Shields. And we look forward to coming at you guys again tomorrow with another exhilarating episode of the Isolation Series. But for now, I am Spence. That is Greg. That is Paul. I'm the better looking one, as always, out of the three of us. And this is the Isolation Series. See y'all again tomorrow as Greg shadow boxes us out of today's episode. Bye-bye. And Paul, please tell people all about some more whole grain goodness that is us.
Folks, be sure to check us out on PodBean.com by going to theisolationseries.podbean.com. There you'll find the audio-only versions of the podcast, including all of our past amazing interviews. One more time, that's theisolationseries.podbean.com. And hey, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. It's at @TheSpencerMiller and at Pauly Shields, Pauly spelled P-A-W-L-Y. So find us on podbean.com, follow us on Instagram, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And once again, everybody, thank you for watching and or listening and supporting this thing we like to call the Isolation Series. For Paul Shields, I am Spencer Miller, and we will see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.